Give me a child until it's 7 and I will show you the man. Your life is a printout of your subconscious behavior. The movie The Matrix is not science fiction, it's a documentary. Falling in love is the equivalent of taking the red pill biologically, because what it does is it keeps you what they call mindful, keeps you conscious. There is no cancer gene. That's an absolute truth. I can say it right here. There is no gene that causes cancer, not one. You have to have some life stimulus, kick it off. Stress is a chemical. It causes the blood vessels to shut down. If you understand epigenetics, you don't need the pharmaceutical industry. You can heal yourself without drugs? And I go, absolutely. It's really an adjustment of consciousness, not an adjustment of your biology. The brain is the chemist. Change the picture, you change the chemistry. The pharmaceutical industry runs the show in medicine. If you could put this kind of healing that I'm talking about into a capsule or tablet, they'd be talking about it right now. A gene is a blueprint. Genes are not a metric of evolution. What is the metric? Consciousness. 7 billion humans come together to create a super organism called humanity. That's our evolutionary paradigm. That's where we're going.
This week on the show, we have Dr. Bruce Lipton, who is a stem cell biologist and best-selling author who promotes the idea that your own DNA can be altered and expressed based on your beliefs. And I'll be honest, I'm an MIT grad. I was taught science as a kid, and I wasn't really feeling some of this because it sounded kind of woo-woo. But he has some interesting points. He coined the term epigenetics, and he really says it's about the expression of that DNA that really matters. And we've been taught since kids almost a fatalistic belief that our futures were preordained by our genetic material, and it's just not really true. You can change your future based on the attitudes and things you believe, and I think that's true. He says 90% of doctors' visits are caused by stress, and I think he's got a point there as well. And I think you'll really enjoy Dr. Lipton. He talks about the matrix, taking the red pill, and how having a super positive attitude can change everything, and how we can really turn back the clock on everything we were taught up to 7 years of age, which determines our lives and how we act. So I love this show. I love Bruce, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. And I also love building businesses. And that's what we're doing with the Business Accelerator. It opens in 1 week. I'm taking a small group of students from around the world through 8 weeks of entrepreneur boot camp. I'm gonna make sure you do the work to turn your passion into a business, just like I did with London Real. Started off 6 years ago as a tiny podcast, and now it's a 7-figure global media company that's moving to our new offices in this big building above us. And so I'm super excited to take you through the Business Accelerator, because it's all about accountability. I'm gonna make sure you do the work over 8 weeks. We have a patented system that drags you through kicking and screaming to turn your passion into that business. I've graduated hundreds and hundreds of students. We know what we're doing, so jump in. We won't do this again until next year. This is our most popular program ever. So go to londonreal.tv/biz, B-I-Z, start watching the free videos and join me. And now I will leave you with Dr. Bruce Lipton. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Bruce Lipton, the stem cell biologist and best-selling author who promotes the idea that genes and DNA can be manipulated by a person's beliefs. Your pioneering research at Stanford University on cloned stem cells presaged the revolutionary new field of epigenetics. Your books, The Biology of Belief, Spontaneous Evolution, and The Honeymoon Effect, explain the mechanisms by which consciousness and perceptions control our health, genetics, and the character of our lives. Bruce, welcome to London Real.
I am so happy to be here because we have some wonderful stuff to talk about, exciting stuff.
I can't wait. And you know, I have been conflicted coming up to this show because I'm kind of from two different worlds. And let me explain that, and then you can jump in and tell me like about your worlds. But as I said earlier, I went to school on the East Coast at MIT. And so I was trained as an engineer, and I was the science kid at school, and I was taught these are this ways and this is how the world works. And yet, the last 6 years on London Real, I've been talking with people that have incredible ideas about consciousness, about spirituality, about energy. And so when I hear you talking about DNA, which I was taught is one thing, and yet now consciousness and perceptions and beliefs and how it can affect biology, two parts of my brain conflict and collide. I'm sure you get this a lot. And so in one sense, it's like someone is saying what my religion used to be, science is wrong, and yet part of my heart knows that it's not right. So how does that sound to you?
Well, it's very interesting because I had to deal with the issue of teaching medical students and going into the classroom, teaching conventional curriculum is the old genes control life story. And so I go in there and teach that to medical students. But when I'd go back in my lab and look at my research on stem cells, my research revealed conclusively that the environment in which the cells live determine genetic activity. So it's complete opposite of what I was teaching in medical school. And the difference is profound. The conventional story, almost everybody's programmed with genes turn on and off, and then they control the character of your life. And if you buy that story, which I did and which I was teaching, it really means that we're victims of our heredity. We didn't pick the genes as far as we know. You don't like the traits, you can't change the genes, and the genes appear to turn on and off by themselves. All of a sudden you see your life is not under your control, it's under the control of the genes. And a lot of people feel that way looking at their family history and going, oh my goodness, I might have the genes for cancer or whatever it is.
Right, and things like 23andMe now probably just reinforce that idea. Because you can go to 23andMe and then you can look at all of your danger zones. Because I did the genetic test and people said, oh, are you supposed to have all these things? And I'm like, I didn't even look, because does that make it worse?
Well, it does, because since consciousness is involved, if once I feed you with an idea that you are susceptible to something, look, I can feed you with an idea that this pill that we just got from the pharmaceutical company, it's the greatest, best thing for your issue. And I give you this pill and you get better. And then later you find out it was a sugar pill and everybody goes, yeah, that's called the placebo effect. And I go, what does it really mean? I said, you didn't get healed by the pill, you got healed by the belief in the pill. And I go, well, yeah, that's what placebo is all about. And at least minimum of one third of all medical intervention is, it's a placebo effect where the healing comes from. And everybody goes, yeah, I know about the placebo. I go, yeah, but that's a result of positive thinking. What about negative thinking? And this is what we don't talk about, but the reality is it's equally powerful in regard to affecting your biology as is positive thinking, but it works in the opposite direction. A negative thought is called the nocebo effect, can cause any disease and you can die. If you believe you're going to die, you can die from the belief. So we really have to watch out because, as psychologists would tell us, 70% or more of our thoughts are negative and redundant, replaying the same negative thoughts. I go, if thoughts had nothing to do with it, fine. But thoughts, positive or negative, shape our biology. And all of a sudden it says, well, now it's time to wake up because our negative thinking is manifesting a negative life experience.
Right, and I do believe that's true, and I want to get to that definitely. But back to this genetics, when you actually talk to people, I guess, like you said, we've been sold early on in our lives that, okay, this great thing came out, it's the double helix and Watson and Crick, and it determines all these things. It happened in the 60s and 70s, and yet now we believe it's gospel. And you're here to say that it's not predetermined. There's other things going on besides your DNA controlling your future. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. But it's not just me saying this. It was me saying this when I first started doing this work in 1970. And my research was repeatable every day. I could stem cells are embryonic cells, so they have no potential until you put them in an environment. And then depending on the culture medium, by the chemistry of the culture medium, I can make the cell become a muscle cell, change the culture medium, make the same cell become a bone cell, or change it again and make the same cell become a fat cell. And genetically, the cell's the same. It was the environment that I was changing. And I started talking about that long before the new science called epigenetics had come into vogue, which was 1990. So I was like 20 years ahead. And of course, for much of that time, my colleagues looked at me like I was a crazy guy because everybody knew the conventional dogma. And I was, coming up with a whole different line of belief about it. And now it's come into mainstream. The only problem is this: when you invest so much money into a belief system, and then a belief system isn't really right, you try to hold on as long as you can, because if you spend hundreds of billions of dollars in this belief, you don't want to just go, oh, okay, we'll just change it. So it's a struggle, but the reality is coming forward, and the public is just becoming aware of it, and it's a revolution because, as I said, if you believe genes control your life, you're a victim of your heredity.
Right. Can you explain epigenetics to people who don't know what that is?
Yeah. Okay. When I say genetic control, that's the belief that genes control our characters. When I say epigenetic control, almost sounds the same, but epi means above. So when I say epigenetic control, literally it's control above the genes. And this is what we now recognize, that the environment, and very specifically our perception of the environment, changes our genetic activity. So that means, well, wait, that's not a victim, because I can change my environment, I can change my perception, and all of a sudden, if I can do that, then I can control my genes. Well, we're going from victim to mastery, from genetics to epigenetics.
Okay. I had a brand new baby boy 3 days ago. He was born. He's gorgeous, of course. And but I'm wondering, if I had that same boy 2 years from now, I mean, it's coming from my same genes, so would he not also be the same? As in, part of my genetic code, I'm not going to be able to change no matter how positive I think. Is that correct?
Not really.
Really?
You can change.
But enough to be passed on to him differently?
Oh yeah, very differently. So, for example, when when parents have one child, they raise it like the first child. Okay, I raise the child this way. After that, if they have a second child, well, they already have all the different experiences of having a child, so they raise the second child different than they did the first child, et cetera, to the third. What's the point is, well, I can start with the same genetics, like my stem cells, same genetics, but it's the environment in which the genes are found that will determine the character and expression.
Okay, so those two boys might express their genetics differently. They could be two different people, but they would still have the same chromosomes and basic DNA structure.
Yeah, now what people have to understand about epigenetics is it changes the reading of the gene. It does not change the gene. Right. If you're born with gene X, you're always going to have gene X, but how will it express itself? And I go, well, it depends on your life and your character, your behavior, your environment. And this is why getting a gene readout, getting your card and reading your genes. It actually, one of the head researchers in the Human Genome Project, upon receiving his own gene readout, it was a quote, and he said he laughed when he read this, because he said, by looking at that, I can't tell if I have blue eyes or brown eyes. I can read all the genes, but I can't tell you what the outcome is going to be, because it's genes plus environment. If it was just genes, I would be able to tell you exactly, here's what's going to happen. But most of that is changeable by how you live and where you live. And as a result, there's only about 7 diseases that are caused by one gene, such as hemophilia, cerebral palsy is another one, Tay-Sachs disease is one. So you got about 7 major diseases, only one gene. If you got that gene, and the gene card shows it, okay, you got that gene, you're going to deal with it. All the other diseases are multiple genes. Cancer is a minimum of 12 to 14 genes, so it's not an accident. You can't change one gene and get cancer. You have to change 12 to 14 genes, and all of a sudden, then probability is a chance. It's like, no, we are creating a cancer, and we can uncreate a cancer. People have spontaneous remissions, but they change it not by changing their biology, but by changing their mind.
Okay, but if I'm born Caucasian with blue eyes,
yes,
that I won't be changing with epigenetics.
Not easily, not easily. Okay, and so let's separate genes in 2 aspects. There's genes that make a physical body. So that's like the robotic. Here it is. It's a machine, okay? But there are genes on how it's going to behave and how it's going to respond and what kind of issues it's going to face. Those are the changeable ones that we change from day to day, your behavior and the consequences of your behavior. Okay? It's not changing the genes, it's changing the readout. So the simple point is a gene is a blueprint. Right away, this is the biggest problem in the world because the idea of a gene must be an illusion to a lot of people. There's something called a gene and it turns on and off. And it goes, no, let's clear this up. A body is made out of 100,000 different protein building blocks. It's sort of like a giant Lego kit. 100,000 different pieces. You can assemble the pieces this way, make a muscle cell, assemble them this way, make a brain cell. Different pieces, you can plug them together. The pieces are called proteins. They're very complex. The question is, where the heck do the proteins come from? And the answer is, the DNA is a blueprint to make a protein. This is where things get dicey after that for this reason. It's a blueprint. That's exactly what it is. And I say, why is it relevant? I say, well, you go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. You lean over her shoulder and you say, excuse me, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at you and go, what, are you crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on or off. Precisely. A gene is a blueprint. It has no ability to turn itself on or off. A gene doesn't know what the hell it does. And the idea is giving all this power to a blueprint has been an error all these years. It's not the blueprint that we're concerned about. It's the contractor who reads the blueprint. And I say, well, what in my biology is the contractor? I go, the mind.
Okay. Talk to me about your journey discovering this and your book, The Biology of Belief. As you said earlier, you were teaching these medical students one thing, and yet in your petri dish, you're finding out that other things are happening. How did you get this message out? How was it received? And now, you've taken it many levels further.
Yeah.
With your own consciousness.
It's only been about 30, 40 years since I recognized it, so I had a lot of opportunity to work on this. But the basic idea is simply this. Let's relate my laboratory experience to a human body so that we can connect it. A stem cell is an embryonic cell. We have billions of stem cells in our body right now. I don't care what age you are. The reason is very simple. Every one of us, every day, loses hundreds of billions of cells, normal attrition, normal death. I mean, just in the time we were talking, we probably lost 1 billion red cells in that time. And you got to replace 1 billion red cells. The lining of the digestive tract, 20 some feet of lining, the cells are replaced every 3 days. Well, that's, nearly 1 trillion cells. It's like, well, every day we're losing hundreds of billions. How many days in a row can you go if you don't replace? And the answer is not very far. So I say, oh, well, we have stem cells, embryonic cells, that will replace them. So that's what a stem cell is.
Okay.
So I put a stem cell in a petri dish, it's an embryonic cell, and I make culture medium. And this is really important because we're going to talk about the connection. The culture medium is the equivalent of blood. If I grow human cells, I look at human blood, the composition, and try to make a version of it in a lab. If I grow mouse cells, I look at mouse blood and make a medium to grow mouse cells in. So I make the medium, and since I'm making it, I can change some of the composition. I'm synthesizing it. That's what I did. So here's the story, very simple. I put one stem cell in a petri dish by itself, and it divides every 10 or 12 hours. So first there's 1, then there's 2, 4, 8, 16, doubling. 1 week, 30,000 cells in the petri dish. But they're all genetically identical because they came from one parent. So I have 30,000 genetically identical cells. I split the cells into 3 petri dishes, so I have genetically identical cells in 3 dishes. But I changed the composition of the culture medium, a little chemistry change, in each of the dishes. So I have genetically identical cells, but slightly different culture medium. And in one set of dishes, the cells form muscle. In a second set, they form bone. In a third set, the cells form fat cells. You say, well, what controlled the fate? I say, they were all genetically identical. So it wasn't the genes. They all had the exact same genes. The only thing that was different was the environment.
Okay. So it's how those genes were expressed.
Right, but it was a reflection of the environment. So the cell is adjusting itself to the environment. Change the environment, it changes its adjustment.
Okay. So you have this quantum leap in observation. You're like, whoa, what do your colleagues say in academia?
Well, they looked at me as a weird kind of guy, because everybody was into genes. Genes were that was before the Genome Project. That was the building up of our genetic repertoire of like everything's genes. And I'm the only guy out there in the corner going, it's not the genes. And they looked at me like the only guy out there in the corner and sort of dismissed it because it didn't fit their conventional story. As a matter of fact, the first time I gave a lecture on it in front of my colleagues, I had left the university, but I come back because I needed a scientific audience to describe what I was working on. At the end of my talk, I said, "Thank you very much." And this room full of people, they just stared at me it was dead silent. I felt like really crazy. I was in front of the room. I said, "Thank you," and they just stared at me. And one guy in the back of the room, I remember he went twice. I mean, it was so clear. And when he did that, everybody looked at him. And then he just put his hands down in his lap. And then about a minute later, they all stood up and they walked out, all my colleagues. And I thought I was crazy.
Why does this happen? Why does that kind of thing happen? Because we think science is fact, but science is based on what's in vogue, right? And it's based on trends and all of that stuff, going back to Galileo or any of these things.
Every time a scientist has come up with a new idea, that scientist was always claimed as being weird or crazy or, way off track. And then those new ideas come in. Howard Temin.
Or sometimes they're just the weirdo.
Well, yeah, that's where they're going to have to distinguish. Where does weirdo leave off and interesting person begin? Okay? And the fact was this. My research was repeatable every day. And you can predict it. The point about that is in science, prediction means you understand something. If you can predict it before you do it, then you have some insight. My predictions were always accurate. It just didn't fit the conventional storyline. And there was a choice, recant, you're a heretic, recant and just say, okay, I was wrong. And I said, no. Every time I was looking around, the results were coming in different ways from different places. So I held on to that. And it took about 20 years before science owned what I was talking about and gave it the name epigenetics. That's the new science.
Okay, which is the belief that through your behavior, you can kind of alter your genetics, pass those on, express it differently. I'm probably using the wrong words.
Well, it's pretty close right now.
People talk about it as a reality, although it's still not totally understood or totally believed. But it can be replicated.
It is now.
Okay.
It is a science. It's a hard science, and it's the leading edge. Now, I'll tell you where the problem comes from. Not so much the scientists, but the pharmaceutical industry. And the reason why this becomes important is because the pharmaceutical industry runs the show in medicine. And if you could put this kind of healing that I'm talking about into a capsule or tablet, they'd be talking about it right now. But this is a consciousness healing, and you can't sell it. And so what's the result? They're not interested in it. And they, through their money, which is massive, actually determine the curriculum in a medical school. And the idea is, well, what's relevant? Well, if you understand epigenetics, you don't need the pharmaceutical industry. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's not in the interest of one of the biggest industries on this planet to say you can heal yourself without drugs. And I go, absolutely.
For people that don't understand that concept, and I do because people have talked about it on London Real before, but talk to me about how the pharmaceutical companies can control the discussion in the entire medical industry. And would most doctors agree with that, first of all? And second of all, how do they do it?
Well, first of all, how do they do it is money. Money is big. Money, if I give grants, you can study what I'm going to give you a grant for. So they direct a lot of research with their billions and billions of dollars. And it was actually interesting, the British Journal of Medicine had a review looking at the same research and determining if the research was funded by government money or the research was funded by private money like pharmaceutical agency. The results came out 4 to 5 times more in the favor of the private industry when they paid for it, as compared to when it was just government money without any special interest behind it. So right away, there's a manipulation of the data. You go, well, you mean these guys are cheating? I go, well, they're selecting the data to fit. Why? Because if I'm getting a grant and I write back, I say, sorry, pharmaceutical, I checked all your stuff and it doesn't work. I'm not going to get another grant from them.
So are the doctors lying?
Well, they're not lying, but they pick data that supports their point. So they already have a conclusion before they even did the experiment.
Okay, even in a double-blind study.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a double-blind study.
Okay, because people bring their own preconceptions to any study.
Absolutely.
And maybe even the pharmaceuticals are choosing which things to fund because they know they'll get the results.
Absolutely, and one of the things they're trying to get rid of are people who respond to the placebo effect, because the placebo effect throws the data right off the chart. A simple fact is this, and people might be upset, but the drugs like Prozac in laboratory tests are no better than a sugar pill. And that's how many billions of dollars a day on this planet are spent buying Prozac.
Yes.
Or statin drugs. Statin drugs help less than 3% of the people that take them. And in fact, they cause side effects that are dangerous in about 23%. So you help 3% with a drug, 23% are getting toxic from the drug. And the idea is these are drugs that, how long do you take statins? How long do you plan to live?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, that's they're drug
They're
dealers.
cash cows.
They're
They are
drug
drug dealers.
dealers.
They're good drug dealers. And I would call you out on placebo effect, but this has been well studied. 60 Minutes has done things about that. A third of the cases isn't far off for, it having a benefit on the sugar pill. So
Absolutely.
We know that's true. And when I talk to people I know in the States, my family members, my relatives, my dad, I'm like, what's going on? And he's always, I'm on this statin, I'm on this cholesterol drug, I'm on this, I'm on this. I'm like, really? Is there something that wrong with you? Like, everyone's medicated there.
It's pushed beyond any belief because it's advertised every 10 minutes on television. There's a new drug or a drug, and it's put into their heads like, your life's not working right. This drug, look at the happy people. See, they've taken the drug and how happy they are. And people buy that story, and drugs kill over 300,000 people a year. Pharmaceutical drugs kill about 300,000 people a year. And everybody's, that's just the cost of doing medicine. And yet they have a war on drugs, which kill less than 30,000 people a year. And all of a sudden you got a war because 30,000 people died. 300,000 people died. That's business as usual. It's like, wow.
And most people would blow their mind with those stats, but I think you're probably right. As in this whole huge war on drugs we have around the planet, all of the overdoses, all of the shocking stories and the things you see in movies, 30,000 deaths. Versus 300,000 due to pharmaceutical drug deaths. Prescribed.
Yes.
By a doctor.
Yes.
That ad that you saw on television.
Yes.
And then you have it. Yeah, that says a lot. Now, how can they actually control the discussions in medical schools? It's one thing if they control the studies. How can they control what people are talking about, what people are teaching?
Where does funding come from? Where does money come from in a medical school? Who gets paid? Doctors get paid. They get paid to prescribe drugs. They have these young women, that you pick. Who are the drug reps? You look at them, you line them up, there's a few guys over there, but most of them are all these pretty young women. Why? They walk in a lab, give a smile, here's some samples, hand these out, and the next thing you know, then the doctor is prescribing their patients to those drugs. There's a story, there's even movies about that. Okay, that's a real story. The schools get money from pharmaceutical agencies, and research, I said, is big. Research is big. People don't understand. When I was teaching at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, I gave 6 lectures a year. And the government at that time and the people were like up in arms, just like, you pay these professors this much money, and some of them like Lipton only teach 6 classes in a year? And when the truth came out, is why? When I get a grant, the school gets an extra 56% of whatever the grant was back then. So if I got a $100,000 grant, the school was given $56,000 to have me have the grant. They called it overhead. Mm-hmm. And when they put the numbers together, the researchers were bringing in nearly half of the money to run a university. So all of a sudden they turn around and go, don't kick the cash cow. If it's 6 lectures, he's still bringing money and paying more than his salary and supporting the school. So research is a very big commodity at a university because it offsets their expenses.
Okay, so it's a racket.
It is a racket.
And all these pristine, like these universities, you look up at these hollowed schools and these noble things, behind the scenes,
money.
It's a lot of dirty money.
Absolutely. Look, I was required to get a grant. That's what allowed me to be there. Well, I said, where do you get your money from? Well, you can get it from government, but government money is less and less every year. Private sources, Muscular Dystrophy Association, American Cancer Society, all these societies support, and pharmaceutical straight cash money, cash cow.
Okay. How do we break this cycle? How do you fight these huge companies?
Basically stop buying the product. And you say, but how can I stop buying the product? And the answer is, well, empower yourself because you're the one that controls all this. Any drug that affects you, you got to understand this. If I take a drug and it affects me, the reason why it affects me is because I have a natural equivalent of that drug in my own biology. You don't take a drug and it affects you and you have a receptor for that drug, like you were having this protein receptor for a drug you may never take. That would be silly. So if you have a receptor for a drug, then by definition, that receptor was already there because there was a natural drug. So in smoking pot, everyone, there's a drug called tetrahydrocannabinol. And guess what? You have receptors for it because you make your own. So the idea is this. well, if you want to have the effect of the drug, do you have to take an outside drug? And I say, no, you have to change your consciousness because you already manufacture every equivalent of a drug right now. And the idea is, if you're not manufacturing it, then that means your consciousness is not supporting you in your health. And it's really an adjustment of consciousness, not an adjustment of your biology.
So it's a mindset shift that we don't need the solution in a pill, that we're not victims, that it's not a fatalist, way of looking at life, that your future is predetermined.
Well, see, that's the old genetic story. Oh, right. You've got this cancer gene. There is no cancer gene. That's an absolute truth. I can say it right here. There is no gene that causes cancer, not one. And I say, well, yeah, but look, Angelina Jolie, she had a double mastectomy because she had the BRCA1 gene. And I go, yeah, 50% of the women with the BRCA1 gene never get the cancer. What's the point? If the gene causes cancer, how can 50% of the women that have the gene not get the cancer? And the answer is the gene alone is not causing the cancer. It's associated with it, but it doesn't cause. You have to have some life stimulus kick it off, and then we'll select that gene. Okay?
And what would that stimulus be?
Mostly in cancer, anger.
Is that proven, or is that just a theory?
No, there's a collective nature of who are the cancer patients. What's a characteristic of a cancer patient? Most of them are very upset in their lives. They're not happy. They're not, releasing their emotions, stresses, holding them in, bottling them in. And the chemistry of stress is a chemical. And the chemical, here's a simple fact. Stress causes at least up to 90% of doctor visits. You say, how can stress do this? And the answer is very simple. Stress causes a hormone called stress hormones, cortisol, to be released in the body. I say, what does cortisol do? I say, number one, it causes the blood in the viscera, the guts, where maintenance of the body and healing comes from all the organs. It causes the blood vessels to shut down because it pushes the blood to the arms and legs. Why? Stress means you're ready to run, fight or flight. So you push the energy to where you need it, arms and legs. Well, where do you get it from? Well, you squeeze the blood vessels in the gut. Well, this is growth. The viscera is growth. That's what the organs are for. Arms and legs are for protection. What's the point? If I'm in protection, I shut off growth. And more importantly, stress hormones shut off the immune system. A reason is just energy. The idea is if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you have a bacterial infection, how do you want to split the energy? How much energy you want to run away and how much you want to fight the with the immune system? The answer is, the hell with the bacterium. I mean, if the tiger catches you, the bacteria is useless. It's meaningless, So when you're in stress hormones shut down the immune system to conserve energy. Does the immune system use energy? Of course. If you've ever been really sick, you never even got out of bed, you have no energy. And if you're in fight or flight mode, you need the energy to deal with the world, okay? So stress hormones physically shut off the immune system. When you're under stress, that's when sickness starts to show up. In fact, it's so good at shutting off the immune system, doctors give patients who are going to receive a foreign organ, a graft of a kidney or a lung or whatever they're grafting, that's foreign tissue. If you put a foreign organ in your body, your immune system's job is to eliminate it. So as they're transplanting an organ, they give the patient stress hormones at the same time because stress hormones will shut off the immune system so the organ won't be rejected right away. That's how effective it is. It's used therapeutically to shut off the immune system. Yeah, but everybody out there in this world right now, with a small exception, is under some level of stress. Stress of my job, stress of money, will I have health care, whatever it is. And I say, yeah, every one of those people is dripping stress hormones continuously in their body, and those hormones inhibit the immune system, and the result is illness. And if you stop the growth, you say, yeah, but I'm an adult, I don't need to grow. And I say, yeah, but you have to replace hundreds of billions of cells that you lose every day. As I said, we just lost now 2 billion red cells.
So Angelina shouldn't have got the double mastectomy.
No, she has to recognize this. There's, the gene didn't cause it, okay, but it's related to a lifestyle. And if you change the lifestyle, you don't have to worry about the gene. But the problem is 95% of our life is coming from the programs of life, how to live life that we get in the first 7 years of life. The movie The Matrix is not science fiction. It's a documentary. Every human, and it's a fact, Every human, first 7 years is download a hypnosis. The brain of a child under 7 is in a lower vibrational frequency. When you put wires on a person's head, you read electroencephalograph, reading brain activity. A child below 7 has a lower vibration than consciousness. It's called theta. Theta is imagination. Oh, that's how kids play a tea party with mud pies, but to them it's a real thing. A kid rides a broom, it's a horse. That's theta, imagination. Theta is also hypnosis. And the idea is this: before you can become conscious, if you don't have any programs, what are you going to be conscious of? It's sort of like I buy a new iPod and I take it out of the box and I push play and nothing happens, and you think, oh my God, I spent all the money and the damn thing isn't working. And then some little 7-year-old kid comes up and says, well, mister, you didn't download any music. How are you going to play something? And I go, that's the same thing. It's like the brain is like the iPod. Consciousness is the screen where I can create. But if I don't have anything in the hard drive, I can't create. So nature makes the first 7 years. What kind of programs are required to live on this planet? I say, how do you get them? Theta is hypnosis. You just watch. You watch your parents, you watch your siblings, and your community, because you have to learn how many 100,000 rules. Think about it. Just to be a functional member of a family and a functional member of a community, there are rules. I teach an infant these rules. I say, oh, you don't have to. First 7 years, they observe it and just download it. And then I say, well, why is it relevant? Because this is the unfortunate fact. 95% of our life, this is a fact, comes from those programs in the subconscious. Every day, only about 5% of their life are you using conscious, which is creative. 5%.
So your life is being lived, even though you think you're living your life.
Exactly, and you don't see it because it's called subconscious, below conscious. And the Jesuits, for 400 years, they were boasting. People didn't understand. They say, give me a child until it's 7 and I will show you the man. They've been saying that for 400 years because they knew 7 years was the program period. And 95% of your life after that will be whatever that program is. So Angelina Jolie runs in a family where there is cancer. And I say, yeah, they have the gene. I say, that didn't cause it. It was the behavior that was passed on. Behavior is passed on, not like genes. It's passed on through families, right, but it's passed on through learning in families.
Okay. In your lecture on the biology of belief, you made this analogy at the end of a camera and then an eye, and how the camera kind of inverts the image and puts it on the film, and yet with our eye, we invert the image, and then we put it through a filter in our brains.
Right.
And this is what you're talking about. The first 7 years of your life puts a filter on everything.
Absolutely. How do you behave?
Right.
Yeah.
There's millions of rules, so you and I can look at two separate things, or two things, and completely have different conclusions.
Right, and it's just based on how you grew up, what you see. You know, look, this is not new. I mean, there's the famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Sure. And basically said you come from a poor family and you could struggle your whole life and try to get rich, but you're not going to make it. And if you come from a rich family, you could be stupid your whole life, Donald Trump, and make it. Not because it was thinking, but it was unconscious behavior that was downloaded from rich families into kids, which is unconscious. So they're making the right moves unconsciously. If they engage their conscious mind, then they look stupid, but it's unconscious. And that's the same thing with poor people. Poor people have beliefs from the family. Oh, you can't make it, life's a struggle, things are hard, who do you think you are? And if that's the program you get, then 95% of the day you will sabotage yourself. And that's why poor people stay poor and rich people stay rich, because the programming.
Yeah, I've had Robert Kiyosaki on the show. It's a great
book.
Well,
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to raise our children differently. Is that what you're saying?
100%. Conscious parenting.
What do we do?
Well, we have to recognize, number one, that 95% of our behavior is coming from subconscious. So a child is going to record for 7 years, and they're going to record you. You have a new baby. That baby is going to look at you because you are the parent. The first thing a baby learns in the first week or two of life, who's the parent? Very important, because that's the reference point. If anything goes in their life, they're going to look at the parent first thing. A child on a playground is on a swing, falls off the swing on the ground. First thing it does is look at the parent. If the mother's like, ah, the kid starts crying. But if the mother goes, get up and get back on the swing, the kid gets back up on the swing. It's reflection. So you have to recognize a child is going to observe every move of you. Then you also have to recognize, well, hell, if 95% of it is coming from my invisible programming, I'm going to pass on the family pattern unconsciously 95% of the day.
Family, country, society, pattern.
The whole the pattern of growing up, the programming.
Okay. Unless I make a conscious effort.
The conscious effort to change your programming, it's very hard to stay conscious. This is why we always go back into the subconscious, because when you're thinking, that's a conscious mind function. So, Brian, what are you doing on Tuesday? If I ask you that, the answer's not out here, it's inside. So the moment you're thinking, you let go of driving the vehicle because you went inside. I go, well, it doesn't mean whatever you're doing, you stop walking or driving the car or doing a job. Those are programs in the subconscious because you've repeated them over and over again. So the subconscious is autopilot. When the conscious is busy, autopilot drives the vehicle. Point is, when conscious is busy, it's not observing what's going on. So let's say we're having this conversation in a car, and I've been driving for 10 minutes, and we've had this great conversation, and all of a sudden I look out the window, I go, I haven't paid attention to the road while we have the conversation. But I go back and say, can I say what the conversation was about? Yeah, we talked about this and this and this. And I say, and what was on the road during that 10 minutes? You go, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. See, that's when the subconscious, so I say, how was your driving? And I go, it was whatever way you learned how to drive. If you had a bad driving instructor, then you were driving 10 minutes with lousy driving.
Okay. So how can I change that then? I need to be more conscious of my subconscious?
You have to be conscious of you see, here's the problem. 7 years is programming. And I say, well, what program did you get when you were 0 or 1? You go, I have no idea what the hell the program was. I say, 95% of your life is coming from the subconscious. Your life is a printout of your subconscious behavior. Oh, so you don't have to try and think about what happened. I just say, look at your life. The things you like that come into your life come in because you have a program that supports them. But anything you struggle with, work hard at, put a lot of effort into making it happen, why you're working so hard, inevitably you have a program that doesn't support that conclusion, and you're trying to override the program. So you don't need to do a lot of shrink and psychology stuff. You just look at your life and say, where am I struggling? Because wherever you're struggling, inevitably it's a program in your subconscious that does not support that destination you've been looking for.
Okay, so it's all, the evidence is all there. You take an honest look at your life and your history, whether it's anything in your life, relationships or business or this or that, and then that'll point to you where there's some kind of incongruence.
Right. I mean, go back to Angelina Jolie.
Right.
She could look at her life and she could say, I could look at the gene and say the gene caused the cancer. I say, no, look at your life, because that behavior was passed from your mother to you, and she got it from your grandmother, and et cetera. And it's a history. It's
your parents
connected.
Who are also actors, starved for attention, angry, you no longer talk to them, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, okay, so now we recognize that, then we try to make a conscious change, which is very difficult.
Now that's where the problem comes from.
All right. Okay.
You want to know the problem?
Yeah.
I guess some of the people might want to hear that answer too. And the thing is this.
This is you evolving, right? This is things that you kind of went from A to B to
I
B
have two
to
different
C.
lives in this lifetime. Before I put this knowledge into effect, and after I put this knowledge into effect, and I use the word put into effect. Why? I had the knowledge academically. It's like, oh my God, look at the research. What does it mean? I understood it from the level. And with all that knowledge, it didn't change my life. People read self-help books. I go, well, you read the book. You got a lot of knowledge. I say, is your life changed? No, but you got a lot of knowledge. And so here's the difference. The conscious mind is creative and can learn in any number of ways. Read a self-help book, go to a lecture, listen to this program, and conscious mind's going to get some awareness. And I go, yeah, but subconscious mind doesn't learn that way. I go, right, it doesn't. Subconscious mind learns in two fundamental ways naturally. Hypnosis, which is the first 7 years. And after age 7, how do you put new programs in? Repetition, practice. You want to drive a car, you didn't learn how by just getting in the seat and put the key in. You had to practice driving the car. You want to learn the alphabet. How many times did you go from A to Z? Try to go to A to Z before you can complete it. Once you completed it, you didn't have to go back and do it again. So 2 phases. You want to train the subconscious mind. Hypnosis, repetition. I like the last one because there's a new phrase that's bandied about called fake it till you make it. Meaning, if you're not a happy person, I say, you want to be a happy person? Then repeat all the time, I'm happy, I'm happy. I say, well, you don't look happy or anything. I say, no, who am I talking to? By repetition, I'm talking to subconscious.
Okay.
If subconscious gets, I am happy, and 95% of your life comes from that subconscious, there will be a point once the subconscious got, I am happy, you don't have to say it again.
Okay.
It'll be automatic.
And that's why we see people do affirmations and gratitude journals and stuff, because if you do that daily,
It's repetitive. That's the secret part. Putting a sticky note on the refrigerator is more like a suggestion, but it's not a repetition. So it doesn't work very well. But you have to do, repetition is a habit. It's making habit. So you got to do something religiously in the sense of repeating it to make it work.
continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
Falling in love is the equivalent of taking the red pill biologically, because scientists have studied what is called mind wandering. I said, what is mind wandering? I said, well, your conscious mind could be focused on a task, or your conscious mind could go off into think about things, okay? And the relevance about that is when the conscious mind is staying in the front, you're in absolute control. Wishes, desires, what you want, conscious mind, creative, you're in control. But the moment your conscious mind takes off into a thought or starts thinking or whatever going on, it lets go of the wheel, the autopilot takes over, okay? So the idea is this: if your mind is wandering, then you're being run by the subconscious. And it turns out this is very negative. When your mind is straightforward in consciousness, you're controlling the vehicle. So I say, falling in love has been demonstrated biologically to be equivalent to the red pill, because what it does is it keeps you what they call mindful, keeps you conscious.